Hello and welcome to day 12 of A Year with Aquinas, where we're reading his Summa in a year. We're continuing today in the first part, question 14, God's Knowledge. You can follow along with me on newadvent.org/summa. Article 15, whether the knowledge of God is variable. Objection 1. It seems that the knowledge of God is variable, for knowledge is related to what is knowable. But whatever imports relation to the creature is applied to God from time, and varies according to the variation of creatures. Therefore, the knowledge of God is variable according to the variation of creatures. Reply to objection 1. Lord, Creator, and the like import relations to creatures insofar as they are in themselves, but the knowledge of God imports relation to creatures insofar as they are in God, because everything is actually understood according as it is in the one who understands. Now, created things are in God in an invariable manner, while they exist variably in themselves. We may also say that Lord, Creator, and the like import the relations consequent upon the acts, which are understood as terminating in the creatures themselves, as they are in themselves, and thus these relations are attributed to God variously, according to the variations of creatures. But knowledge and love and the like import relations consequent upon the acts which are understood to be in God, and therefore these are predicated of God in an invariable manner. Objection 2. Further, whatever God can make, he can know, but God can make more than he does. Therefore, he can know more than he knows. Thus, his knowledge can vary according to the increase and diminution. Reply to objection 2. God knows also what he can make and does not make. Hence, from that fact that he can make more than he makes, it does not follow that he can know more than he knows, unless this be referred to the knowledge of vision, according to which he is said to know those things which are in act in some period of time. But from the fact that he knows some things might not be which are not, or something that might be which is not, it does not follow that his knowledge is not variable. Rather, it does not follow that his knowledge is variable, but rather that he knows the variability of things. However, if anything existed which God did not previously know, and afterwards knew, then his knowledge would be variable. But this could not be, for whatever is, or can be in any period of time, is known by God in his eternity. Therefore, from the fact that a thing exists in some period of time, it follows that it is known by God from eternity. Therefore, it cannot be granted that God can know more than he knows, because such a proposition implies that first of all he did not know, and then afterwards knew. Objection 3. Further, God knew that Christ would be born, but he does not know now that Christ will be born, because Christ is not to be born in the future. Therefore, God does not know everything he knew once, and thus the knowledge of God is variable. The ancient nominalists said that it was the very same thing to say, quote, Christ is born, end quote, and will be born and was born, because these things signified, or rather, because the same thing is signified by these three, i.e., the nativity of Christ. Therefore, it follows, they said, that whatever God knew, he knows, because now he knows that Christ is born, which means the same thing as that Christ will be born. This opinion, however, is false, because the diversity in the parts of this sentence causes a diversity in the enunciations, and because it would follow that a proposition which is true once would always be true, which is contrary to what the philosopher lays down when he says in this sentence, quote, Socrates sits, quote, it is true when he is sitting and false when he rises. Therefore, it must be conceded that this proposition is not true, quote, whatever God knew, he knows, end quote, if referred to the innumerable propositions. But because of this, it does not follow that the knowledge of God is variable. For as it is without variation in the divine knowledge that God knows one and the same thing, sometimes to be, and sometimes not to be. So it is without the variation in the divine knowledge that God knows an inequable proposition is sometimes true and sometimes false. The knowledge of God, however, would always be variable if he knew innumerable things by way of enunciation, by composition and division, as occurs in our intellect. Hence, our knowledge varies either as regards truth and falsity, for example, when either as regards truth or falsity, for example, if when a thing suffers change, we retain the same opinion about it, or as regards diverse opinions, as if we first thought that anyone was sitting, then afterwards that he was not sitting, neither of which can be found in God. On the contrary, it is said that in God, quote, there is no change nor shadow of alteration, end quote. James 1:17. I answer that, since the knowledge of God is in his substance, as is clear from the foregoing, just as his substance is altogether immutable, as was shown above, his knowledge likewise must altogether be invariable. Article 16. Whether God has a speculative knowledge of things. Objection 1. It seems that God has not a speculative knowledge of things, for the knowledge of God is the cause of things, as shown above. But speculative knowledge is not the cause of things known. Therefore, the knowledge of God is not speculative. Reply to Objection 1. The knowledge of God is the cause, not indeed of himself, but of other things. He is actually the cause of some, that is, of some things that come to be in a some period of time, and he is virtually the cause of others, that is, of things which he can make and nevertheless are never made. Objection 2. Further, speculative knowledge comes by abstraction from things which does not belong to the divine knowledge. Therefore, the knowledge of God is not speculative. Reply to Objection 2. The fact that knowledge is derived from things known does not essentially belong to speculative knowledge, but only to accidentally, insofar as it is inhuman. In the answer to what is objected on the contrary, we must say that perfect knowledge of operable things is obtained only if they are known insofar as they are operable. Therefore, since the knowledge of God is in every way perfect, he must know that what is operable by him, formally as such, and not only insofar as they are speculative. Nevertheless, this does not impair the nobility of speculative knowledge. For as much as he sees all things other than himself in himself, he knows himself speculatively, and so in the speculative knowledge of himself, he possesses both speculative and practical knowledge of all other things. On the contrary, whatever is more excellent must be attributed to God, but the speculative knowledge is more excellent than practical knowledge, as the philosopher says in the beginning of Metaphysics. Therefore, God has a speculative knowledge of things. I answer that some knowledge is speculative only, some is practical only, and some is partly speculative and partly practical. In proof whereof, it must be observed that knowledge can be called speculative in three ways. First, on the part of the thing known, which are not operable by the knower, such as the knowledge of man about natural or divine things. Second, as regards the manner of knowing, as for instance, if a builder considers a house by defining and dividing, and by considering what belongs to it in general, for it is to consider operable things in a speculative manner, and not as practically operable. For operable means the application of form to matter, and not the resolution of the composite into its universal formal principles. Thirdly, as regards the end, quote, for the practical intellect differs in its end from the speculative, end quote, as the philosopher says. Now, for the practical intellect is ordered to the end of the operation, whereas the end of the speculative intellect is a consideration of truth. Hence, if a builder showed how a house can be made, not ordering this to its end of operation, but only to know how to do it, this would be only a speculative consideration as regards the end, although it concerns an operable thing. Therefore, knowledge which is speculative by reason of one thing itself known is merely speculative. But that which is speculative is either in mode or as its end is partly speculative and practical. And when it is ordained to an operative end, it is simply practical. In accordance with this, therefore, it must be said that God has of himself a speculative knowledge only, for he is not operable. But of all other things, he has both speculative and practical knowledge. He has speculative knowledge as regards the mode, for whatever we know speculatively, and things can be defined, and things by defining and dividing, God knows all this much more perfectly. Now, of things which he can make, but does not make at any time, he has not a practical knowledge according as knowledge is called practical from its end, but he has a practical knowledge of what he makes in some period of time, and as regards evil things, although they are not operable by him, they yet fall under his practical knowledge, like good things, inasmuch as he permits, or impedes, or directs them, as also sickness falls under the practical knowledge of the physician, inasmuch as he cures them by his art. Question 15. Ideas. Article 1. Whether there are ideas. Objection 1. It seems that there are no ideas, for Dionysius says that God does not know things by ideas. But ideas are nothing else except that things may be known through them. Therefore, there are no ideas. Reply to Objection 1. God does not understand things according to an idea existing outside himself. Thus, Aristotle rejects the opinion of Plato, who held that ideas existed of themselves and not in the intellect. Objection 2. Further, God knows all things in himself, as has already been said, but he does not know himself through an idea, neither therefore other things. Reply to Objection 2. Although God knows himself and all else by his own essence, yet his essence is the operative principle of all things except of himself. It has therefore the nature of an idea with respect to other things, though not respect to himself. Objection 3. Further, an idea is considered to be the principle of knowledge and action, but the divine essence is a sufficient principle of knowing and affecting all things. Therefore, it is not. Therefore, it is not. It is not therefore necessary to suppose ideas. Reply to Objection 3. God is a similitude of all things according to his essence. Therefore, an idea in God is identical with his essence. On the contrary, Augustine says, quote, "Such is the power inherent in ideas, that no one can be wise unless they are understood." End quote. I answer that. It is necessary to suppose ideas in the divine mind, for the Greek word idea is in Latin forma. Hence, by ideas are understood the form of things existing apart from the thing themselves. Now, the form of anything existing apart from the thing itself can be for one of two ends. Either to be the type of that which it is called the form, or to be the principle of the knowledge of that thing, inasmuch as the form of the things are knowable, are said to be in the one who knows them. In either case, we must suppose ideas, as is clear from the following reason. In all things not generated by chance, the form must be the end of generation whatsoever. But an agent does not act on account of the form, except in so far as the likeness of the form is in the agent, as may happen in two ways. For in some agents, the form of the thing to be made pre-exists according to its natural being, as in those that act by their nature, as a man generates man, or fire generates fire. Whereas in other agents, the form of the thing to be made pre-exists, according to the intellectual being, as in those that act by the intellect. And thus the likeness of a house pre-exists in the mind of the builder, and this may be called the idea of the house, since the builder intends to build his house like to the form conceived in his mind. And thus the world was not made by chance, but by God acting by his intellect, as will appear later. There must exist in the divine mind a form to the likeness of which the world was made, and in this notion of an idea, and in this is the notion of an idea consists. Article 2. Whether there are many ideas. Objection 1. It seems that ideas are not many, for an idea is in God's essence, but God's essence is one only. Therefore, there is only one idea. Reply to objection 1. The divine essence is not called an idea insofar as it is in that essence, but only so far as its likeness or type of this or that thing. Hence, ideas are said to be many, inasmuch as many types are understood through the same self-essence, rather the self-same essence. Objection 2. Further, as the idea is the principle of knowing and operating, so are art and wisdom, but in God there are not several arts or wisdoms. Therefore in him there is no plurality of ideas. Reply to objection 2. By some art and wisdom we signify that by which God understands, but an idea that which God understands. For God, by one understands many things, and not according to what they are in themselves, but according as they are understood. And this is to understand the several types of things. In the same way, an architect is said to understand a house when he understands the form of the house and matter. But if he understands the form of the house as devised by him, from the fact that he understands it, he thereby understands the type or idea of the house. Now, not only does God understand many things by his essence, he also understands that he understands many things by his essence. And this means that he understands several types of things, or that many ideas are in his intellect as understood by him. Objection 3. Further, if it be said that ideas are multiplied according to their relation to the different creatures, it may be argued on the contrary that the plurality of ideas is eternal. If then ideas are many, but creatures are temporal, then the temporal must be the cause of the eternal. Reply to objection 3. Such relations whereby ideas are multiplied are caused not by things themselves, but by the divine intellect comparing its own essence with these things. Objection 4. Further, these relations are either real in creatures only, or in God also. If in creatures only, since creatures are not from eternity, the plurality of ideas cannot be from eternity. If ideas are multiplied only according to these relations, but if they are real in God, it follows that there is a real plurality in God, other than the plurality of persons. And this is against the teachings of Damascene, who says, in God all things are one, except, quote, in generality, generation, and procession, end quote. Ideas, therefore, are not many. Reply to objection 4. Relations multiplying ideas do not exist in created things, but in God. Yet they are not real relations, such as those whereby the persons are distinguished, but relations understood by God. On the contrary, Augustine says, quote, ideas are certain principal forms, or permanent and immutable types of things, they themselves not being formed. Thus they are eternal and existing always in the same manner, as being contained in the divine intelligence. Whilst, however, they themselves neither come into being nor decay, yet we say in accordance with them everything is formed that can rise or decay, and all that actually does so. I answer that. It must be necessarily held that ideas are many, in proof of which it is to be considered that in every effect the ultimate end is the proper intention of the principal agent, as the order of an army is the proper agent of the general. Now, the highest good existing is in things is the good of the order of the universe, as the philosopher clearly teaches in metaphysics. Therefore, the order of the universe is properly intended by God, and is not the accidental result of succession of agents, as has been supposed by those who have taught that God created only the first creature, and that this creature created the second creature, and so on, until this great multitude of beings was produced. According to this opinion, God would have produced the idea of the first thing alone, whereas if the order itself of the universe was created by him immediately, and intended by him, he must have an idea of the whole universe. Now, there cannot be an idea of any whole unless particular ideas are had of those parts which of the whole is made. Just as a builder cannot conceive the idea of a house unless he has had the idea of each of its parts. So then it must needs so then it need so then it must needs be that in the divine mind there are the proper ideas of all things. Hence Augustine says, quote, that each thing was created by God according to the idea proper to it, end quote. from which it follows that in the divine mind, ideas are many. Now, it can be easily seen how that this is not repugnant to the simplicity of God, if we consider that the idea of a work is in the mind of the operator as that which is understood, and not as the image whereby he understands, which is a form that makes the intellect an act. For from the form of the house in the mind of for the form of the house in the mind of the builder is something understood by him, to the likeness of which he forms the house in matter. Now it is not repugnant to the simplicity of the divine mind that it understands many things, though it would be repugnant if to simplicity if were his understanding to be formed by a plurality of images. Hence, many ideas exist in the divine mind, as understood by it, as can be proved thus: inasmuch as he knows his essence perfectly, he knows everything according to the mode in which it can be known. Now it can be known not only as it is in itself, but as is participated by in creatures, according to some degree of likeness. But every creature has its own proper species, according to which it participates in some degree in the likeness to the divine essence. So far therefore, God, as God knows his essence, as capable of such imitation by any creature, he knows it is the particular type and idea of that creature, and in like manner as regards other creatures. So it is clear that God understands many particular types of things, and these ideas are many. Article 3. Whether there are ideas of all whether there are ideas of all things that God knows. Objection 1. It seems that there are not ideas in God of all things that he knows. For the idea of evil is not in God, since it would follow that evil was in him. But evil things are known by God. Therefore, there are not ideas of all things. There are not. I'm sorry. Therefore, there are not ideas of all things that God knows. Reply to objection 1. Evil is known by God not through its own type, but through the type of good. Evil therefore has no idea in God, neither insofar as an idea is exemplar nor as a type. Objection 2. Further, God knows things that neither are nor will be nor have been, as has been said above. But of such things there is no idea, since as Dionysius says, quote, acts of the divine will are the determining and the effective types of things. End quote. Therefore, there are not ideas in God of all things known by him. Reply to objection 2. God has no practical knowledge, except virtually, of things which neither are, nor will be, nor have been. Hence, since with respect to these things there is no idea in God, insofar as idea signifies an exemplar, but only insofar as it denotes type. Objection 3. Further, God knows primary matter, of which there can be no idea, since it has no form. Hence the same conclusion. Reply to objection 3. Plato is said by some to have considered matter as not created, and therefore he postulated not an idea of matter, but as but a concause with matter. Since, however, we hold matter to be created by God, though not apart from form, matter has its idea in God, but not apart from idea of composite, for matter in itself can neither exist nor be known. Objection 4. Further, it is certain that God knows not only species, but also genera, singulars, and accidents. But there are not ideas of these, according to Plato's teaching, who first taught ideas, as Augustine says. Therefore, there are not ideas in God of all things known by him. Reply to objection 4. Genus can have no idea apart from the idea of species, insofar as it denotes an exemplar, for a genus cannot exist except in some species. The same is the case with those accidents that are inseparably accompany their subject, for these come into being along with their subject. But accidents which supervene to the subject have their special idea. For an architect produces through the form of the house all the accidents that originally accompany it, whereas those that are superadded to the house when completed, such as painting or any other such thing, are produced through some other form. Now, individual things, according to Plato, have no other idea than that of the species, both because practically things are individualized by matter, which some say he held to be uncreated and the concause with idea, and because the intention of nature regards the species and produces individuals only that in the species they may and produces individuals only that in them the species may be preserved. However, divine providence extends not merely to species but to individuals, as will be shown later. On the contrary, ideas are types existing in the divine mind, as is clear from Augustine. But God has the proper types of all things that he knows, and therefore has ideas of all things known by him. I answer that. As ideas, according to Plato, are the principles of knowledge of things and of their generation, an idea has this twofold office, as it exists in the mind of God. So far as an idea is the principle of the making of things, it may be called exemplar, and belongs to practical knowledge. But so far as it is the principle of knowledge, it is therefore called a type. It may belong to speculative knowledge also. As exemplar, therefore, it has respect to everything made by God in any period of time, whereas the principle of knowledge, it has respect to all things known by God, even though they never come to be in time, and to all things that he knows according to their proper type, insofar as they are known by him in a speculative manner. Question 16. Truth. Article 1. Whether truth resides only in the intellect. Objection 1. It seems that truth does not only reside in the intellect, but rather in things. For Augustine condemns this definition of truth, quote, "That is true which is seen," end quote, since it would follow that stones hidden in the bosom of the earth would not be true stones, as they are not seen. He also condemns the following, quote, "That which is true, or rather, that is true which is as it appears to the knower, who is willing and able to know," end quote. For hence it would follow that nothing would be true unless someone could know it. Therefore he defines truth thus, quote, "That is true which is," end quote. It seems that then truth resides in things, not in the intellect. Reply to objection 1. Augustine is speaking about the truth of things, and excludes from the notion of this truth relation to our intellect. For what is accidental is excluded from every definition. Objection 2. Further, whatever is true by reason of truth. If then truth is only in the intellect, nothing will be true except insofar as it is understood. But this is the error of ancient philosophers, who said that whatever seems to be true is so. Consequently, contradictory seems to be true as seen by different persons at the same time. Reply to objection 2. The ancient philosophers held that the species of natural things did not proceed from any intellect, but were produced by chance, as they saw that truth implies relation to intellect. They were compelled to base truth on things on their relation to our intellect. From this conclusion, results that are admissible, and which the philosopher refutes. Such, however, do not follow if we say that truth of things consists in the relation to the divine intellect. Objection 3. Further, quote, "That on account of which a thing is so is itself more so," end quote, as is evident from the philosopher. But it is from that fact that a thing is or is not, that our thought or word is true or false, as the philosopher teaches. Therefore, truth resides in things rather than in the intellect. Reply to objection 3. Although the truth of our intellect is caused by the thing, yet it is not necessary that truth should be there primarily, any more than health should be primarily medicine, rather than in the animal. For the virtue medicine, and not its health, is the cause of health. For here the agent is not univocal. In the same way, the being of the thing is not its truth, is the cause of truth in the intellect. Hence the philosopher says that a thought or word is true, quote, "from the fact that it is a thing, not because a thing is true." On the contrary, the philosopher says, quote, The true and the false resides not in things, but in the intellect. End quote. I answer that. As good denotes that towards which the appetite tends, so the truth denotes that towards which the intellect tends. Now, there is the difference between the appetite and the intellect, or any knowledge whatsoever. That knowledge is according as the thing is known in the knower, while appetite is according as the desires tend towards the thing desired. Thus, the term of appetite, namely good, is in the object desirable, and the term of the intellect, namely true, is in the intellect itself. Now, as good exists in a thing, insofar as that thing is related to the appetite, and hence the aspect of goodness passes on from the desirable thing to the appetite, insofar as the appetite is called good, if the object is good. So, the true is in the intellect, insofar as it is conformed to the object understood. The aspect of true, must needs pass from the intellect to the object understood. So also that the thing understood is said to be true, insofar as it has some relation to the intellect. Now, a thing understood may be in relation to an intellect, either essentially or accidentally. It is related essentially to an intellect on which it depends as regards its essence, but accidentally to an intellect by which it is knowable. Even as we may say that a house is related essentially to the intellect of the architect, but accidentally to the intellect upon which it does not depend. Now, we do not judge of a thing by what is in it accidentally, but by what is in it essentially. Hence, everything is said to be true absolutely, insofar as it is related to the intellect form which it depends, and thus it is that artificial things are said to be true, a being related to our intellect. For a house is said to be true that expresses the likeness of the form in the architect's mind, and words are said to be true so far as they are signs of truth in the intellect. In the same way, natural things are said to be true, insofar as they express the likeness of the species that are in the divine mind. For a stone is called true, which possesses the nature proper to a stone, according to the preconception in the divine mind. Thus, then, truth resides primarily in the intellect, and secondarily in things according as they are related to the intellect as their principle. Consequently, there are various definitions of truth. As Augustine says, quote, truth is what thereby is made truth is whereby is made manifest, which is, end quote. And Hilary says that, quote, truth makes being clear and evident, end quote. And this pertains to truth according as is in the intellect. As to the truth of things insofar as they're related to the intellect, we have Augustine's definition, quote, truth is a supreme likeness without any unlikeness to a principle, end quote. Also, Anselm's definition, quote, truth is rightness, perceptible by the mind alone, end quote. For that which is right is in accordance with the principle. Also, Avencia's definition, quote, truth of each thing is in the property of the essence, which is immutably attached to it, end quote. The definition that truth is the equation of thought and thing, end quote, is applicable to it under either aspect. Article 2. Whether truth resides only in intellect composing and dividing. It seems that truth does not reside in the intellect. Objection 1. It seems that truth does not only reside in the intellect composing and dividing. For the philosopher says that as the senses are always true as regards their proper sensible object, so is the intellect as regards what a thing is. Now, composition and division are neither in the sense nor in the intellect knowing what a thing is. Therefore, truth does not reside only in the intellect composing and dividing. Reply to objection. The objections are solved, and I answer that section. Objection 2. Further, Isaac says in his book on definitions that truth is the equation of thought and thing. Now, just as the intellect, with regard to complex things, can be equated to things, so also regards to simple things, and this is true of the sense apprehending a thing as such. Therefore, truth does not reside only in the intellect composing and dividing. On the contrary, the philosopher says that with regard to simple things and, quote, what a thing is, end quote, truth is, quote, neither found in the intellect nor in things, end quote. I'll answer that. As stated before, truth resides in its primary aspect in the intellect. Now, since everything is true according as it has the proper form to its nature, the intellect, insofar as it is knowing, must be true, so far as it has the likeness of the thing known, this being its form as knowing. For this reason, truth is defined by its conformity of the intellect and thing, and hence to know this conformity is to know truth. But in no way can this sense know, for although sight has the likeness of the visible thing, it yet does not know the comparison which exists between the thing seen and that which itself apprehends concerning it. But the intellect can know its own conformity with the intelligible thing, yet it does not apprehend it by knowing of a thing, quote, what a thing is, end quote. When, however, it judges that a thing corresponds to the form which it apprehends about the thing, then first it knows and expresses truth. This it does by composing and dividing, for in every proposition it either applies to or removes from the thing signified by the subject, some form signified by the predicate, and this is clearly shown as that the sense is true of anything, as is also the intellect. When it knows what a thing is, but it does not know but it does not thereby know or form this truth. This is, in the like manner, the case with complex or non-complex words. Truth, therefore, may be in sense or in the intellect knowing what a thing is, as anything that is true, yet not as the thing known in the knower, which is implied by the word truth. For the perfection of our intellect is truth as known. Therefore, properly speaking, truth resides in the intellect composing and dividing, not in the senses, nor in the intellect knowing what a thing is. Article 3. Whether truth and being are convertible terms. It seems that truth and being are not convertible terms, for true resides properly in the intellect, as stated, but being is properly in things. Therefore, they are not convertible. Reply to objection 1. Truth resides in things and in the intellect, as said above. But true that is in things is convertible with being as to substance, while true that is in the intellect is convertible with being as to manifestation with manifest. For this belongs to the nature of truth, as has been said already. It may, however, be said that being also is in the things and the intellect, as is the truth. Although truth is primarily in things, and this is so because truth and being differ in idea. Objection 2. Further, that which extends to being and not being is convertible with being, but the truth extends to being and non-being, for it is true what is, and what is not, is not. Therefore, true and being are not convertible. Reply to objection 2. Not being has nothing in itself whereby it can be known, yet it is known insofar as the intellect renders it knowable. Hence, true is based on being, inasmuch as not being is a kind of logical being, apprehended by, that is, by reason. Objection 3. Further, things which stand to each other in order of priority and posterity seem not to be convertible, but the true appears to be prior to being. For being is not understood except under the aspect of the true. Therefore, it seems that they are not convertible. Reply to objection 3. When it is said that being cannot be apprehended except under the notion of the true, this can be understood in two ways. In one way, so as to mean that being is not apprehended unless the idea of the true follows the apprehension of being, and this is true. In the other way, so as to mean that being cannot be apprehended unless the idea of the true be apprehended also. This is false. But the true cannot be apprehended unless the idea of the being be apprehended also. Since being is included in the idea of true, the case is the same if we compare the intelligible object with the being. for being cannot be understood unless the being is intelligible. Yet being can be understood while its intelligibility is not understood. Similarly, being, when understood, is true, yet the true is not understood by understanding being. On the contrary, the philosopher says that there is the same disposition of things in being and in truth. I answer that, as good has the nature of what is desirable, so truth is related to knowledge. Now everything, in as far as it has being, so far as it is knowable. Wherefore it is said in De Anima that, quote, the soul is in some manner, all things, end quote. Although the senses and the intellect, through the senses, let me try that again. Wherefore it is said in De Anima that the soul is in some manner all things, through the senses and the intellect. And therefore, as good is convertible with being, so is true. But as good adds to being the notion of desirability, true adds relation to the intellect. Article 4. Whether good is logically prior to truth. Objection 1. It seems that good is logically prior to true, for what is more universal is logically prior, as it is evident from physics. But the good is more universal than truth, since true is a kind of good, namely of the intellect. Therefore, the good is logically prior to true. Reply to objection 1. The will and the intellect mutually include one another, for the intellect understands the will, and the will wills the intellect to understand. So then, among the things directed of the object of the will are comprised also those that belong to the intellect, and conversely. Whence, in the order of things desirable, good stands as the universal, and truth as the particular. Whereas, in order of intelligible things, things are the converse of the case. From that fact, then, that the true is a kind of good, it follows that the good is prior in the order of things desirable, but not, that is, prior absolutely. Objection 2. Further, good is in things, but truth is in the intellect, composing and dividing as said above. But that which is in things is prior to the thing to that which is in the intellect. Therefore, good is logically prior to truth. Reply to objection 2. A thing is logically prior insofar as it is prior to the intellect. Now, the intellect apprehends primarily being itself. Secondly, it apprehends that it understands being. And thirdly, it apprehends that it desires being. Hence, the idea of being is first, and that of that of truth second, and the idea of good third, though good is in things. Objection 3. Further, truth is a species of virtue, as is clear from Ethic. But virtue is included under good, since, as Augustine says, it is a good quality of the mind. Therefore, good is prior to true. Reply to objection 3. The virtue which is called truth is not truth in general, but a certain kind of truth according to which man shows himself in deed and word as he really is. But truth, as applied to life, is used in a particular sense, inasmuch as a man fulfills in his life that to which he is ordained by the divine intellect, as it has been said that truth exists in other things. Whereas, the truth of justice is found in a man as he fulfills his duty to his neighbor as ordained by law. Hence, we cannot argue from these particular truths to truth in general. On the contrary, what is in more things is logically prior, but the true is in some things wherein good is not, as for instance in mathematics. Therefore, true is prior to good. I'll answer that. Although the good and true are convertible with being as suppositum, yet they differ logically. And in this manner, the true, speaking absolutely, is prior to good, as appears from two reasons. First, because the true is more closely related to being than good, for true regards being simply itself, and immediately, while the nature of good follows being insofar as being is in some way perfect, for thus it is desirable. Secondly, it is evident from the fact that knowledge naturally proceeds from appetite. Hence, since true regards knowledge, but good regards appetite. Thus, true must be prior to good, true must be prior an idea to good. Article 5. Whether God is truth. It seems that God is not truth, for truth consists in the intellect composing and dividing, but in God there is no composition and division. Therefore, in him there is not truth. Reply to objection 1. Although in the divine intellect there is neither division nor composition, yet in his simple act of intelligence he judges all things and knows all things complexly, and thus there is truth in his intellect. Objection 2. Further, truth, according to Augustine, is, quote, likeness to the principle, end quote. But in God there is no likeness to a principle. Therefore, in God there is not truth. Reply to objection 2. The truth of our intellect is according to its conformity with the principle, and that is to say, to the things from which it receives knowledge. The truth also of things is according to their conformity with the principle, namely with the divine intellect. Now, this cannot be said, properly speaking, of the divine truth, unless perhaps insofar as truth is appropriated to the Son, who has a principle. But if we speak of the divine truth in its essence, we cannot understand this unless the affirmative must be resolved into the negative, as when one says, quote, the Father is of himself, because he is not from another, end quote. Similarly, the divine truth can be called, quote, likeness to the principle, end quote, inasmuch as his existence is not dissimilar to his intellect. Objection 3. Further, whatever is said of God is said of him as the first cause of all things. Thus, the being of God is the cause of all other beings, and his goodness the cause of all good. If therefore there is truth in God, all truth will be from him. But it is true that someone sins. Therefore, this will be from God, which is evidently false. Reply to objection 3. Not being and privation have no truths of themselves, but only in the apprehension of the intellect. Now all apprehension of the intellect is from God. Hence all the truth that exists in the statement, quote, that a person commits fornication is true, is entirely from God. But to argue, therefore, quote, therefore that this person fornicates is from God, end quote, is a fallacy of accident. On the contrary, the Lord says, quote, I am the way, the truth, and the life, end quote. John 14:6. I answer that, as said above, truth is found in the intellect, according as it apprehends a thing as it is. And in this, things, according as they have being, conform to an intellect. This is to the greatest degree found in God, for his being is not rather, for his being is not only conformed to his intellect, but to the very act of his intelligence. And his act of understanding is the measure and cause of all other being and all other intellect. And he himself is his own existence and act of understanding. Whence it follows not only that truth is in him, but that he is truth itself, and that the sovereign and first truth. And we will continue tomorrow on Article 6, whether there is only one truth, according to which all other things are true. I hope you've enjoyed today's episode, and if you do, I hope that you come back tomorrow and share it with a friend. Have a good day, and God be with you.